Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Vegan Women Leaders. I'm your host, Katrina Fox, and I am so delighted to have the wonderful Jasmin Singer as our guest today. Jasmin is a writer and speaker on topics including radical body positivity, personal narrative as a means of social justice, and how to change the world for animals. Currently based in New York, she's the author of the VegNews Guide to Being a Fabulous Vegan. I love that title. And Always Too Much and Never Enough, a memoir. Along with animal law professor Mariann Sullivan, Jasmin is also the co-host of the long-running Our Hen House podcast, an award-winning show all about animal rights. A longtime activist across many different issues, including animal activism, LGBTIQ activism, antiracism and more, Jasmin is the former senior editor of VegNews Magazine and the longtime love columnist and celebrity interviewer. She's also presented a Tedx talk called Compassion Unlocks Identity. And if that's not enough, she's also a talented actor. She starred in the film The Bra Mitzvah, another great title, and has appeared in nationwide television commercials and performed stand-up comedy. Jasmin, I'm so happy to speak with you today.
Thank you so much, Katrina. I love being able to connect with you, and I'm such a giant fan of all that you're doing, so it's really an honor.
Oh, look, likewise. I feel like in some ways we've got so much in common, you know, both lesbian, queer, vegan, animal rights, background in journalism. I actually did my degree in performance art, and I love a good show tune as well. I know that's something that you enjoy, so I kind of feel like we're soul sisters. So this is fantastic to speak with you.
I said to my wife this morning, I was telling her about this interview, and I said, Katrina's like the Australian version of me, or I'm the American version of her. Or something.
Too funny. I love that. So I'd love to start off with just a little bit. Now, you've obviously written about a lot of this in your memoir, which I highly recommend everybody read. It's a brilliant and compelling page turner. But just give us a little bit of a helicopter ride, a little bit of a brief overview of kind of where you grew up and anything that your experience of within your childhood that's maybe impacted or had an impact on who you are today.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Yeah, I have the distinct honor and very odd situation of having a lot of this memorialized in my book, like you said, which is such a weird thing. But I grew up in Edison, New Jersey, which is about an hour outside of New York City. Very sort of suburban USA in those bright electric 1980s. I grew up with a very odd relationship with food, which is something that is a big focus of my memoir. I did not think that it was something that was there to keep us healthy or there to sate us or there to nourish us. I thought it was something that was there to change us into someone else. And so I had a somewhat complicated relationship with food that lasted for several decades. I ultimately went vegan when I was in my 20s, 24, living in New York City, where I was trying to pursue acting. And I went down another path at that point of realizing that food is a deeply personal political issue. So it kind of all comes together in my memoir, Always Too Much and Never Enough. Food, body image, where we bring in social justice, how identity plays a role, and of course, the bottom line of compassion.
I love that. So I'd love to dive in a little bit to one of those topics around thin privilege. Now, I believe you wrote an article in 2014 where you actually talked about where you lost a bunch of weight and suddenly you kind of entered the cool kids club and you were offered these kind of benefits and opportunities. So talk us through that first. So what happened? You lost some weight. What kinds of opportunities? Like, how did your life change?
Well, this is an evolving story for sure. I'll kind of give you a big spoiler alert that right now I'm trying to place another book, which is called What I Gained. And it's about telling a skinny chasing society to go screw themselves, basically, and how we can embrace and love our bodies no matter what. But at the time when Always Too Much and Never Enough came out, I had firsthand knowledge about how when you lose a lot of weight, the world that frequently was pushing you aside suddenly is accepting and celebrating you. And that had a super weird impact on me because I didn't trust it at all. And it kind of gave me insight into just how bad the bullying had been. I had always long suspected as growing up as a fat kid, kind of following my thin mom around from Weight Watchers meetings to Jenny Craig meetings to Nutrisystem meetings, where she was trying to go from like thin to thinner. I was her fat kid following around behind her, wondering where I fit in. It was something that was very complicated for me. And ultimately, when I was in my early 30s, I'm in my early 40s now, but when I was in my early 30s, I had lost a lot of weight. And I realized that there was a lot that hadn't been available to me at the time when I was heavy. So that's when my book
Such as, can you give a couple of examples? What specifically
everything from when I was trying to get a talent agent, when I was trying to ask someone for directions to the subway, there was a lot of like, no, there was a lot of general jerky behavior. There were a lot of men who thought that I was sort of this like person who was there for their use. And of course, that mindset is an extension of why I'm an animal rights activist, because no bodies are there for anyone else's use, hence veganism and the liberation of all bodies. And, men would suddenly hold doors for me when I had been thin. The person who lived upstairs from me, who never said hello for the years and years that we lived near each other, was suddenly introducing himself, telling me how great I looked. It was like, as you said, I had this invitation to be in the cool kids club. And that's when I got a book deal, which Katrina is another example of thin privilege, and I'm not thin anymore. So that's a whole other story, but the story evolves, and so do we.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's shocking. I appreciate you sharing that. So like you say, you got the book deal, and I think you've written about how you were still kind of working through some food addiction issues while you were writing the book. So you put the weight back on, or you put some weight back on, and then things changed. So how did you experience, like, what did you feel at that time? And now there's, I guess, as you said, it's an ongoing issue, but there's a little bit of distance from it. What is your kind of take on all of that now that you've experienced that, being, larger as a child, getting the thin privilege while then putting the weight back on? What was your take on it at the time, and how do you feel about all that now?
Oh, I love you. I love your questions. I love that you just go right in. This is exactly what I'm most interested in writing about these days and in talking about these days. But, I got through a lot from the time that that Always Too Much and Never Enough came out to my 65 city book tour around the United States, talking about it and recognizing through the reflection of others that my story is incredibly universal. It is a universal story that we all feel we're always too much and never enough. And for me, that food addiction that started when I was a young kid, ultimately, was something I was able to conquer full on when I stopped going to food obsessively and building my eating around shame. It was something that when I stopped being a part of the toxic diet culture, I wound up losing a lot of weight, and I wound up, addressing a lot of these issues within myself. And then when I was, the book came out, the tour was over, I wound up going through a giant personal life change. I moved across the country to California. I was the senior editor at a major food magazine. I was nearing 40. I was going through a divorce. And I think at that time, I stopped focusing on juicing, which is something that I did a lot of to lose weight. And I started to realize that even if I ate in a very healthy, wholesome way that wasn't entirely focused on weight loss, that wasn't entirely focused on calorie deprivation, my body was gonna get bigger. That's what happens. We change, our bodies change. And yet what didn't happen was I did not re-invite in that food addiction. It was gone. I have a very, very healthy relationship with food and a very healthy relationship with my body and my body image. So that's kind of where I'm at in the story now. And it's not like I'm perfect. It is not a linear process, but I feel like all of this was preamble.
Right. I love that. And I love that you're writing a new book. I think that's going to be brilliant because you're such an amazing writer and talented writer. You're accessible, but you also kind of get to the heart of things and really provoke a lot of thinking. And I know we were on the call just before we came on this call. You know, you have such an impact on people's lives. And our friend Nivi Jaswal said you're personally responsible for her going from plant-based to a card-carrying ethical vegan. So I love that you have this impact, and I'm very excited about your upcoming book. Because you're right, it's about this whole kind of self-acceptance thing. And I think particularly, not exclusively, but particularly as we know, women and girls, are impacted by this, like you say, with toxic diet culture, with, told that we're not enough, we're, not pretty enough, we're not thin enough, unless we buy this product. And then we might get a shot at, being better in some way. So I love that you've come to this particular path where you're at now, where, you're self-accepting of yourself and your body. You mentioned that you're obviously going through a big personal change, like you said, divorce, moving across country. That's a lot. How did you get to that place of self-acceptance of your body? Because it's easy to kind of say it logically, but to actually get it into with all these ingrained messages. I'd love to know, how do you think you actually got there, and what advice could you offer to anyone else who might be struggling with those kinds of issues?
Yeah, I moved back to New York recently, but when I was still in LA, I was taking this acting class, and there was this young woman in the class who was in her early 20s, and she was very, very svelte, blonde. She was white. She was sort of your classic American beauty in a very generic, stereotypical way. And I saw the way she treated herself, and I saw how uncomfortable she was whenever she would see a photo of herself. And you have no idea how much I wanted to swoop in and be her mama hen and tell her, like, you don't need to care this much about what you look like. And I can relate to that. I can relate to waking up in the middle of the night and this is what's running through my head. Is my body enough? Is my body too much? Am I eating enough? Am I eating too much? And having that take up so much brain space. But the truth is, I couldn't really give this woman that message because she sort of needed to experience it on her own, just like I did. So how did I get to the place where I feel confident in who I am? I think part of it was ending my toxic relationship with food and seeing it as something that could set me free and that could heal the world and save animals and be a political force that I stood behind. I think that was part of it. But beyond that, it was really about a deep letting go and reparenting, a deep letting go of these sort of messages that were instilled in me from the time I was very, very young. And if there is a time when we allow ourselves to open up to change, it is frequently through giant life events, such as divorce, such as a giant move across the country. I spent so many days and nights crying and in the fetal position and making mistakes and continuing on with toxic relationships with people or substances. And as I started to reflect on how much energy I was spending, and as I eventually turned 40, that'll change you. As I eventually turned 40, I started to recognize that mortality was not just this vague concept, but that this wasn't exactly, someone else's story. This was my story, and I was living it. And why was I wasting so much energy on what the world thought of me? As I talk about in my TED Talk, I realized that compassion very frequently must begin with ourselves. And then we can truly unlock our activism, our caretaking, and our being of service in a new, bigger way.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right, that it's like those messages are so ingrained. And yeah, I can totally relate to what you said about being 40. The same goes for 50 as well. So
I can't wait.
I know that's what. Well, my wife Tracy, she's now 65, and she's like, "Oh yes, your 60s are even better." And I'm like, "Really? Okay." But it is, this self-talk that that we have. What impact has this had then? Because that's quite a big shift, and I love it, and I love that you embody that. What impact has letting go of all those messages and learning to love yourself, feel confident within yourself? What impact has that had on your life? As whether that's your personal life, your relationships, your work, and your activism?
Well, Katrina, I want to go back to the how, because I feel like I might have spoken a little too broadly. And I think some people hear things like that and they're like, oh, okay, so she got to a really good place, but how? What is the secret there? And it's not like it's a secret. And I'm not necessarily saying that my way will work for someone else, but I will say that it is a series of mini interventions that we have to do with ourselves and our thought process 1,000 times a day. So if any time I have that little "I hate you" voice come up, I have to actually first start to recognize it. Okay. I just was self-deprecating. I recognize that and note it. And then I have to literally say, I don't hate you. I'm learning to love you. And, be patient with me because it's been a long time of us, having a bad relationship, and we're going to get better at it. It might sound weird that I'm talking to myself as if I'm not myself, but in a way I'm talking to like my little kid self, like the little baby Jasmin. I'm talking to the self that I project that isn't authentic. So how do you do it? You change the script. And it is a matter of noticing it and literally stopping when you notice it and changing the words you're saying, even if you're faking it. Like that, to me, if there is a secret, that's the secret. You can fake it until you make it. It is a matter of saying, you know what? I am comfortable having sex with the lights on. Turn the lights on. And even if you're not, you kind of have to go through it the first time. And then suddenly it's like, oh, I'm sort of digging how sexy I feel. I'm sort of digging how sexy my partner thinks I am. I really like seeing my partner with the lights on. So if we can start to like fake the way we're talking to ourselves, then we can get to maybe shift it. It will shift. It will eventually shift. So I think I lost the thread of your original question, but
no, that's cool. I can relate to that about the changing. I'll sometimes do that where I'll get a negative, and I mean, I'll probably have to be a bit kind to myself because instead, I love the way you shifted the language. I will sometimes say, "Stop it!" Like if I hear something like a negative, I'll be like, "No, stop it." But then it would be nice, to bring that compassion in that you mentioned and to switch it. But it's that whole awareness, and it does. It's interesting how many times a day that those kind of messaging can just slip in, and it is a case of that awareness. So I love that you shared that. Thank you. So my query was, now that you've got to this place, how has having this much more positive image of yourself and not being so caught up in what you look like, how has that impacted your life, your relationships, your work, and your activism?
Well, I think that the funny thing is that the thing that popped into my head is that when I was very, very little, maybe before all of this had gotten in, I remember my mom, who was an artist and is still an artist, would let me choose my own outfits. And so I remember wearing like this giant tutu. It's like pink tutu with like, a rainbow sweater and like some ridiculous hat. And she'd be like, okay, well, I mean, you do you. And then I think I started to assimilate to society a little bit more. And so back now at the other end of it, I would probably still choose that outfit. So how has it impacted me? I think it made me really recognize what my own preferences are a lot more than my preferences that I'm expected to have. I mean, Katrina, try being a woman over 40 who doesn't have human children, who in my case is, a lesbian and in my case, an atheist and, and is totally tattooed. The world is not necessarily rolling out the red carpet for people like us, and yet I'm rolling it out for myself. So how does it, and for you and for anybody else who's maybe a little bit more offbeat or is like has previously been pushed aside or marginalized, so how has it changed my relationship to others? I think I can access a little bit more patience and compassion than I was able to before. It's not all the time. I work on it literally every day, but I think that having more patience and compassion for myself has ultimately allowed me to be a kinder person, a more compassionate, accessible person, while being true to my own boundaries of what I need in order to succeed every day.
I love that. And I love that we spend less, like all that energy that we spend, it's exhausting, isn't it? Kind of, giving ourselves all these negative messages and that constant focus on the negativity of ourselves, that when we can start to free that up, we have more energy to do other things, like positive things, like you say, invest in our relationships or within our work or our activism. So I love that you shared that. Now, on the topic of beauty, because this is an interesting one, you're head of editorial at The Kinder Beauty, which is a fabulous vegan cosmetic subscription service founded by actresses Ivana Lynch and Daniela Monet. And I would love to know, because it's an interesting one, like the beauty industry. Like I'm sitting here, we're both sitting here with screaming red lipstick. See, look, another thing in common. I'm sitting here, screaming red lipstick, full makeup. There's no way I'm going to rock up to a podcast or, go out somewhere, and, if I'm going out, dancing or whatever, and not put makeup on. And I know when I put makeup on, I'll look and I'll go, yes, I look fabulous. I look glamorous. Do you know what I mean? And then when there's this whole thing of somehow when we put makeup on or cosmetics make us feel prettier, and that's of course what the beauty industry almost it's kind of telling us. I'd love to know what or how can we, because I know you're doing this at Kinder Beauty, how can we make the beauty industry feel more inclusive and more fun and perhaps theatrical and performative, as opposed to we must put makeup on so that we don't look as ugly, or so that because this makes us more beautiful. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. I would say, and I definitely want to address how we are approaching this at Kinder Beauty, which I love. But I do want to say that I don't think that necessarily people put makeup on because they feel ugly without it. I don't think it's necessarily true that people put makeup on because they want to look prettier. I don't think that I do. I don't think that that's why I do it, but it might be something for me to examine. I mean, I don't think that there's always a simple answer to these things. And I started wearing makeup when I was 8, and it was bright blue eyeshadow and red lipstick because it was the 80s. I think as far as the inclusivity, we need to represent all genders, all body types and sizes, all races, and all ages in the reflection of what we're putting out there, and everything from our social media to the products in the boxes themselves, and recognize that beauty, just like food, is a deeply personal political issue. Just like food, you can actually use beauty as something that contributes to a better world, or you can use beauty as something that hides you from a better world. And at Kinder Beauty, what I love about it is that it is ultimately very mission driven. It was based in an animal rights ethos and a bottom line of compassion for all. And I think that is something that extends in our products, in our charitable giving, in our one-time collections. I have a meeting on the schedule for next week to discuss our Pride collection. We have to date donated nearly $40,000 to animal rights and human rights and environmentalist groups, which I'm very proud of. I think it's important that companies and organizations of all kinds learn and practice racial equity. That's something that's very important to me in my own personal work, and as an extension of that, any professional work that I'm doing. And we prioritize it at Kinder Beauty, at Our Hen House. We prioritize it at VegNews. So I think that when it comes to beauty, it can be about how you take care of yourself and how you take care of each other. It can be about how you're creating a palette on your face, which is something that I know Ivana Lynch, who is a good friend of mine and founder of the company, is very passionate about self-expression and creativity. And so, it's funny because this red lipstick came in my Kinder Beauty box the other day, and I was like, I don't wear red lipstick. And then I put it on and I was like, that's fun. It makes me feel like I'm on stage or something. And I love a good spotlight. So it's all about earning who we are that day. Some days it's no makeup. Some days it's, just the long johns or the sweatpants that you're wearing. Some days you want to dress up and be a little blingy. It's just about how we get to have fun with our bodies and our skin. That's why I have so many tattoos and our expression. And so I love it. I think beauty is a really fun key to unlocking a particular type of social change.
I love that. And I love that take on it. And I really hope that message spreads, because I know, look, when I was younger, and I'm talking like in my 20s. So, I'd come out, I think when I was about 20, I was going to lesbian nightclubs and I was wearing my icons at the time were like, Betty Davis, Joan Crawford, Elizabeth Taylor, all the, Joan Collins, all the really glamorous ones. But I remember like putting like my makeup on. And at that time, it's not so much now, it's definitely not now, but at the time it was a mask for me. It was a kind of like, right, once I've got my red lipstick on and my makeup on, I'm safe. Do you know what I mean? It's like this thing. So it's kind of interesting.
But how there's days that's okay. Like there's days we need some armor. I woke up this morning and it was hard to get out of bed. Like, my body was like, no, sleep more. But my schedule was like, you have a meeting. And some days you need to kind of distract from your fatigue with eyeliner. That's okay. Some days you need to nourish your bad mood with chocolate. That's okay. We have all of this available to us for a reason. And if it's rooted in cruelty-free and it's rooted in vegan, then it's something that can actually be a beautiful, abundant part of our worldview expression.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love that. I do love that.
In the nightclub. I
love
that.
I look with the literally long ball, get like splingy, big heels, all the rest of it. And I look back now, I was like, okay. But I love the message of it. Like, and I guess if there's a takeaway from this is I hope that that people take your message, which is of, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing, not because because I used to go to like the old school radical feminist, consciousness raising movements in the 80s, where I was told that my screaming red lipstick was a tool of the patriarchy and I was oppressing myself and others. I had my long hair. I had my sisters are doing it for themselves t-shirt and my Doc Martens on, but that wasn't enough. I had to get rid of my lipstick and I wouldn't, and cut my hair and I wouldn't. So, but I love the message that you're putting forward is that I'm doing this for me. I am enough. I am beautiful with and without it, but I'm going to get fun with this. I'm going to put the, eco glitter on my eyes or,
right.
the red lipstick. So I love that message. And I love that you're doing that with Kinder Beauty. So on the topic of fat vegans, and I know this is terminology you've used, or chubby, whatever these terms that, people use to self-identify. And this is a tricky one. This might be a slightly controversial question, but what is your take on how do we balance the whole body positivity and radical body positivity with genuine concerns about obesity and some of the health issues that come out of it? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think it is a controversial question, and part of the reason why is because it is difficult to broach these subjects without like one side or the other accusing you of this or that. And so I hope, and I appreciate that you're putting it out there, because I hope that people can approach questions and answers with openness and a curiosity. So from where I stand, I think that body positivity needs to be absolutely rooted in fat acceptance. And I think that like the problem with the body positivity movement, as it were, and I don't speak for like all activists here, but from where I stand, I think the problem is that body positivity is frequently too broad in its scope. And it is the fat bodies and the differently abled bodies who we are that we are marginalizing. And so when we talk about body positivity, like there's I want to feel good about my body at any size. That is true. But part of that needs to be to understand on a deeper level how we have been partaking in a system that is rooted in the oppression of fat bodies. So that means more specifically making sure that the stores that we shop from are size inclusive. It means that the representation that we are following on social media is inclusive of all bodies. And within veganism specifically, it is tricky because we absolutely, or it's not actually tricky. We need to have the representation of all bodies. That part is not tricky. The tricky part is that that a lot of people who are not yet vegan but are in the fat acceptance sort of activist beat think that veganism is an extension of toxic diet culture. Whereas I think a lot of us would be like, no, it's not. We want liberation of all bodies. That's the through line between fat acceptance and veganism. We don't see bodies of other oppressed beings as food. We see them as individuals. So that is kind of like, let's put that over there because that wasn't your question, but that is something that we kind of have to sort of address and break through somehow. But we can't do so if we're doing it from an oppressive place. And the vegan movement, as it were, has been long known for pushing forth the ideal of skinny and pushing forth the idea that veganism equals weight loss, veganism equals health, veganism equals whatever you need to do to your body to look better. And that's not what veganism is at its core. At its core, veganism is a lifestyle and a worldview that is rooted in a radical compassion for all animal bodies, including our own. And so how do we address what you just said? I think that there's a lot of misinformation. I think that we have to first recognize that there's misinformation. I think that my blood work comes back healthy all the time, and I would identify as a fat vegan. Would someone put me on the front cover of a brochure? Probably not, unless it was for like some kind of LGBTQ, thing. And they were like, we need a tattooed lesbian. Oh, let's get Jasmin or Katrina. Let's get Jasmin and Katrina. But I don't think that like the cover of a veg starter guide would look like me. And that's because, they're probably putting a certain type of body on the cover of it. So before we approach what you're saying, like that obesity equals not being healthy, I think we need to question that. Is that always true? Because when I can tell you that there was a moment when I was in my early 20s, when I was suffering from, eating disorders, that I was not healthy. I didn't get my period. I got faint all the time, but my body was thin. Was I the picture of health? Absolutely not. But if you looked at my body then and my body now, you might say, oh, that thin body is the healthy one. That heavier body isn't. So I think that the problem is in the question, not yours, but the question that everyone has. I don't think that we need to address that.
Yeah, got it. No, it's interesting to get that. And I want to touch on what you said about, I like the way you said that there's issues like or it's like that either or. It's the infighting, which you and I have seen a lot of, in the women's movement, LGBT, any, animal rights, any social justice movement. We've got a lot of that kind of infighting. People, one side thinks this, one side thinks this, and kind of the art of nuance can get a bit lost. So I'd love you maybe to touch on that. How do you handle it? Because I know you've obviously been trolled throughout your life. And how any thoughts on how we can kind of tackle infighting, and how do you handle it yourself?
Oh, I don't handle it consistently. I'll tell you how I'm handling it today, but it's possible that we'll talk in a month and I'm handling it differently. And I'd be curious what you think too. But first of all, I think social media is a brilliant, brilliant thing. I think it's incredible what it allows any activist to do, including animal rights activists and vegan advocates. I think it's remarkable that we can put in #vegan in Sydney and I would learn all about all of the places near you. I think that's unbelievable. It like blows my mind. But I think that Facebook in particular is not going to ever change anyone's mind. Am I being hyperbolic? Absolutely. But if I go into Facebook recognizing that Facebook will not change anyone's mind, then I will 100% detach myself from any commenting, because I need to save my energy for better things. And I think Facebook has evolved to be really, really good in terms of groups, like Facebook groups being there to support you, and ads. I think that's it. I think Facebook is good for groups and ads. Anything else to me is a waste of energy, and I fall into it. I mean, I'm human, but how do I deal with the trolls? I try to stay out of it to some extent, and recognize that it's just echo chambers. It's people yelling their thing, and then that person yelling their thing, and they're never going to see eye to eye. But I'm not sure if that's the best way forward or not. I can see an argument on the other side, but that's what I need to do to take care of my own sanity.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I pretty much have been taking that approach, certainly, more recently in the last, maybe 2-3 years or so, because I used to get stuck in, to those arguments and get typing away. And you're right. I mean, will it change people's minds? I mean, look, potentially. I mean, I know certainly, maybe not in those kind of argument type situation, but I certainly know, and I'm sure you've had people come and say, oh yeah, I've had people say, I've seen your Facebook, who are not vegan, who have said, I've seen your Facebook post and I've now decided to become vegan. And that I'm like, oh good, it's all worth it. But I think that, like you say, taking that time and energy to have those constant same arguments over and over again is not helpful. It's where can we best put our energy. I guess for me, it reflects almost the larger divisiveness that's going on in the world at the moment. And I think it's that kind of lack of nuance, certainly on those social media platforms. And I don't know exactly what the answer is. I just know, for myself, I'm taking a similar approach to you. I do like Facebook as a platform in certain aspects. I think, I don't like what it's done, particularly recently. It's blocked all the news in Australia because of the whole situation that's gone on this week. But I like the fact that we've got these facilities like you, and I think they can be used for good. But I just scroll on by. I mean, sometimes I will see posts like literally just slamming people, like, people bringing each other down. And I used to kind of get stop, and have a little look. And then I'm like, do you know what? I'm training myself, a bit like you with the messages, the internal messages. Yes. I'm training myself to scroll on past some of those really toxic ones. Yeah, exactly. Like, stop it. Keep on going. But I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So I'd love to, as we're getting near towards the end, I'd love to talk about your new book, The VegNews Guide to Being a Fabulous Vegan. I said when you first posted about it, look at it, I love the words fabulous and vegan together. It's just wonderful. So tell us about, the title, why did you come up with the title? And just give us a little overview. What is it? How is it different to other books on veganism?
Thanks, Katrina. I got a tattoo of Fabulous Vegan, but I'm trying to find it. Oh, it's here.
Oh, nice.
You see it?
No, yeah, you can see it. Lovely. Wow. I love it. You are a fabulous vegan. Yes.
So are you. Well, it's funny because when I started the proposal for this and I started the process of putting it together, I had Fabulous Vegan as a placeholder. Like, I did not think that would be the name of the book because, my first, as you know, editors have the final say on the book title. You don't have the final say on it. I mean, certainly not at big publishers. And so it just kind of worked. And it just, it to be fabulous, in my opinion, is to be vegan, and to be vegan is to be fabulous. And I love the word fabulous. I love saying it. I love that it's sort of like, it sounds sort of queer when you say it. Like, fabulous.
Yes, I was just thinking that when you said that's fabulous, darling.
And it's like, also, you just talked about Betty Davis, and like, it's kind of this nod to this sort of old fashioned, like, oh, darling, you're fabulous, and I partnered with VegNews on this book, and it was because I've been with VegNews in some capacity for like going on 17 years as a writer, eventually as the senior editor, as the columnist. Colleen Holland, who's the publisher, is a really good friend of mine, was the perfect partner for me with this book. And beyond that, we wanted to make it like a manifesto. Every question that I have ever gotten asked in my time of being vegan is covered in this. Every single thing you need to know. And what I love about it is that, you know, we live in this sort of quick culture where we can't really sit and read long articles or long books because we're so used to social media posts. My book, The VegNews Guide to Being a Fabulous Vegan, is something that you can just read any chapter within 5 minutes. And it's going to cover everything from world hunger to climate change to what to eat for lunch to if vegans have better sex, we do, to everything in between. And every chapter ends with a recipe that VegNews provided. So VegNews has been leading the charge in terms of, you know, mainstreaming veganism for 20 years, and VegNews was a perfect partner for this book because our collective knowledge and resources allow us to cover everything. And what I love about it is that even though I'm writing this, you know, not necessarily as Jasmin, I'm writing this not first person. It's written in a way that's like my beliefs, my perspectives. Anti-racism needs to be a part of the picture. Being size inclusive needs to be part of the picture. The chapter on weight is not about weight loss, though there is a section about weight loss that is equal to a section about weight gain and weight maintenance. It isn't prescribing one. The chapter ends with affirmations that you can tell yourself to boost your self-confidence. This is all, to me, part of a vegan worldview. And that's what I think is fabulous about Fabulous Vegan.
Oh, I love that. And it is indeed a fabulous book. And I love that you've written it. And I love that it's got that fresh perspective, you know, and yeah, because obviously, you know, lots of books about veganism out there. It depends on where people are at. But I love there's this resource where, like you said, people can dip into. It's got that fun aspect to it as well. And yeah, all of that inclusivity, I think, is fantastic. So highly recommend you grab a copy of the VegNews Guide to Being a Fabulous Vegan. See, I love saying it as well.
It's a great book. The recipes are iconic. I mean, they came from the best recipe developers and cookbook authors out there who have been working with VegNews forever. So you'll enjoy it.
Absolutely. Right. Our final section is our rapid fire question. So I'm going to ask you questions and you just answer them in maybe one sentence or, you know, so just little short answers to wrap up with. What's the most courageous thing you've done?
Wow, Katrina, I've never thrown. The most courageous thing I've done was move across the country to California when New York City was such a big part of my identity.
Nice. Love it. What does leadership mean to you? And what style of leader would you say you are?
Leadership is connected to humility. It has to be. And the type of leader I am is a flawed one who is interested especially in self-accountability and in working with young women to become stronger versions of themselves.
I love that. I love that. It's a really unique take on leadership. I love it. Now, I know you've had a journey to love and self-acceptance, but what do you love most about yourself?
My sense of humor. I think it gets me. It's like this little voice in the back of my head that gets me through difficult times. It's always there.
Nice. I love it. And finally, anything you would like to share, maybe a key lesson that you've learned? Obviously, there's lots, but if there's one or two you'd like to spotlight that you would like to share that would help other vegan women leaders.
Don't feel you have to be the expert in everything to talk about it. I think that remember that if you have that voice in your head telling you shouldn't talk about it because you don't know every part of something, that is imposter syndrome, and it was created by the patriarchy. So say it anyway.
I love that. I love that. That should be memed. Right? We'll meme that and put it out. That's wonderful. Oh, Jasmin, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Everybody do check out, if you want to find out more of Jasmin's work, her writings and everything, do check out jasminsinger.com. And of course, you can listen to the wonderful Our Hen House podcast, which is on all the platforms. And you can find the website at ourhenhouse.org. vegnews.org. And of course, check out Jasmin's memoir, Always Too Much and Never Enough. And of course, I'm going to say it again, the Veg News Guide to Being a Fabulous Vegan. Jasmin, you are absolutely a fabulous vegan. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. I love your take on things, your inclusivity and your straightforwardness, your passion. I love it, and I love you. It's been wonderful speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Katrina. I'm a big fan. I really appreciate you, and it's been super fun.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Bye for now.